So let's go to page 14. Asma Kumara will lead the chanting. Please maybe do it faster.
Katame Chattaro Itapikave Bhikkhu Kaye Kaya Nupassi Viharati Atapi Sampajano Satima Vinaya Loke Abhicchado Manasang Vedanasu Vedananupassi Viharati Atapi Sampajano Satima Vinaya Loke Abhicchado Manasang Chitte Chittanupassi Viharati Atapi Sampajano Satima Vinaya Loke Abhicchado Manasang Dhammesu Dhammanupassi Viharati Atapi Sampajano Satima Vinaya Loke Abhicchado Manasang Uddeso Nittito.
Okay, thank you. Now we look at the translation on page 14. Talking about the four Satipatthanas, here the definition has already been explained at the beginning when I talked about the structure of Satipatthana Sutta. Here you please try to correlate the English and the Pali words by yourself. I would just like to bring your attention to some words there. Look at page 15, note number 3, the word analysis of Anupassi. Anupassi comes from Kayanupassi, Vedananupassi, Chittanupassi, Dhammanupassi is one of the components of the words. So Anupassi, one who contemplates, is an agent noun derived from the verb anupassati, which means to look at, to contemplate, to observe. Anupassati can be further analyzed into anu, which means repeatedly, accordingly or closely, and passati, which means to look or to see. If you look at it and you want to translate it literally, you could translate it as, if you want to use the word look at and observe, you could translate it as an observer, or you could translate it as one who looks at repeatedly. Alright? At first, I also preferred this rendering, observing observing body in the body. But I figured that this does not really work for the other exercises that are found in the Satipatthana Sutta, in our Satipatthana Sutta in the under Kayanupasana, particularly the one about the Asubha, the 32 parts of the body and the 9 corpses. Elements, you can observe the elements. You can feel the sensations in the body and step back and just keep on observing them changing. But when it comes to the two parts of the body, it's something that you have to imagine and you have to think about, you have to reflect. Right? It's not just mere observation. And corpses, also the same. You have to try to imagine and then you have to put yourself into the shoes of the corpses and say, I will also become like that, I've not gone beyond like that, and so forth. So there's a lot of reflection going on. And the Pali word itself is also reflecting. So finally I had to settle for contemplating, just like what the other English translators have done, instead of using the word observing. So to contemplate here means to consider or think carefully, as well as to closely and repeatedly look at something with the mind, not with the eyes. Alright, so it covers both reflection as well as observation. So that's why I stuck to contemplation instead. Now go on to note number 4, which is about sampajana, also a very important word. As you can see, it occurs in all of the definitions. Right? Atapi sambhajano satima. Can you see that? In all of the paragraphs. And here, sambhajano is translated as clearly knowing. Right? And looking at the word analysis of sambhajana, it says, one who clearly knows is an agent noun derived from the verb sampajanati, clearly knows. Sampajanati can be further analyzed into some, properly or thoroughly, pa or meaning diverse, and janati, knows. If you combine them all together, some meaning properly, thoroughly, plus pa, diverse, then you have the word clearly, which is vague enough to cover everything. And also it's quite elegant to translate it as clearly knowing. Now I also pointed out that this sampajana occurs in all of the 4 Satipatthanas, not just one. Although if you look on page 26 under the Kayanupasana, one of the exercises of the Kayanupasana is called the section on clear knowing. Can you see that? Now, there's a big question mark. Why Sambhajana, the section of clear knowing, is only found for Kayanupasana when it occurs in the definition for all of the Anupasanas? Can you see? Can you see this point? Yeah, in every Anupasana it says that there's Atapi Sambhajano Satima Vinaya Loke Abhijado Manasam. Ardent, clearly knowing and mindful, having subdued longing and dejection in regard to the world. Right? Now, what is Sambhajana? Sambhajana is clearly knowing. How does one clearly know? What does it entail? So can you please turn to page 90, Appendix 1. This Sati Sutta comes from Satipatthana Sutta, and this is only an excerpt from it. Actually, the sutta starts off by the Buddha encouraging the bhikkhus to live being mindful and clearly knowing. And then he defines what is meant by being mindful. Live mindfully, what does that mean? And then he gives the 4 Satipatthana formula. And then after that he asks what is meant by clearly knowing. How does one dwell clearly knowing? And in this sutta he says that, and how monks is a monk clearly knowing? Here amongst feelings are known when they arise, known when they remain present, and known when they go away. His thoughts are known when they arise, known when they remain present, and known when they go away. His perceptions are known when they arise, known when they remain present, and known when they go away. It is in such a way amongst that the monk is clearly knowing. If you contrast this with what you can see on page 26, quite a vast difference, right? Not because in here it's talking about a monk who acts clearly knowing in going forward and returning, in looking ahead and looking away, in bending, stretching his limbs, and so forth. All these seems to be concerned with physical activities, minute physical activities. And perhaps because it seems to be concerned with minute physical activities that it is put under Kayanupasana. But when you look under here, Appendix 1 on page 90, it's not about physical activities, right? What is it about? It's about the mind. Yeah, it's about feelings, thoughts, and perceptions. But whatever physical activities you do are always motivated by these things. They are motivated by your thoughts, by your feelings, by your perceptions. So when you talk about Sambhajano, clearly knowing, that's why it applies to all the 4 Satipatthanas. In order to know the body clearly, you have to catch your intentions, your thoughts, feelings, and perceptions before you can really catch hold of your physical activities. It's the same for your feelings, mind, and dhammas. Now, going back to page 14, I often tell people that there are actually 4 prerequisites for the practice of Satipatthana, of the 4 Satipatthanas. And what are they? They are, number 1, being ardent, energetic. Number 2, clearly knowing. Number 3, mindful. And number 4, having subdued longing and dejection in regard to the world. The first three is quite obvious in the sense that you have to put in effort to practice the Satipatthanas. Secondly, you must clearly know what's happening in your mind. And thirdly, you must remember to do so. You must remember the technique of doing so, and you must remember the fourth R particularly. What is the fourth R? Retrospect, looking back at your mind. Only when you look back at your mind can you know thoughts as they arise, when they persist, when they go away. Right or not? Only when you look back at your mind can you learn that perceptions and feelings arise, persist, and go away. If you don't look back, you don't know. Yeah, most people don't know. So if you really want to practice Satipatthana, these three things must be there. And the third one is having subdued longing and dejection in regard to the world. This is a translation of the word Vinaya, Loke Abhijja Domanasam. Please look at the word Vinaya down at page 15. Note number 5, word analysis of Vinaya. Vinaya is a gerund. Now maybe the word gerund is not such a good grammatical word to use for this Pali word. Maybe we should use the word absolutist, right? Absolutive. That's another grammatical term for this. According to Asma Kumara, this sort of grammatical term is translated in Mandarin as liao. Liao, isn't it? Liao means 走了, after having done something. You know, it indicates a preliminary action that is followed by another action. So if you say viharang gantva, okay, viharang gantva bhikkhung pasati. Having gone to the vihara, gantva means having gone to the vihara, bhikkhung pasati, he sees a bhikkhu. Pasati means to see. Yeah? He sees a bhikkhu after having gone to the vihara. So it indicates a prior action to another one. So Vinaya is an absolutive derived from the verb vineti, which means to lead away, to remove, to put away, to give up, to discipline, or to instruct. Now, if we translate it literally, it could be something like having removed, having put away, having given up longing and dejection in regard to the world. But if we were to translate it in this way, it would mean that you have to completely abandon or overcome longing and dejection before you can start to practice Satipatthana. Which some teachers argue that this indicates that you have got to get the jhanas first before you start to practice Satipatthana. If you translate it that way. Why not? Because they say that, when one obtains the jhanas, the 5 hindrances, which include these 2, are abandoned temporarily. However, it is also part of Satipatthana in the Dhammanupassana to contemplate the hindrances. Is that not so? That's the first exercise under Dhammanupassana. So there seems to be some sort of contradiction. So some translators prefer to translate it as while removing. Now this is it's like the present continuous tense. While removing longing and dejection in regard to the world, then you practice the 4 Satipatthanas. This is also a possible translation. But I prefer this translation, having subdued longing and dejection in regard to the world, because I feel that you must have some degree of control over these. If you are obsessed by longing and dejection with regard to the world, you will not be able to step back and look at them. So there must be some degree of control over longing and dejection before you can step back and look at it. Right? It may not be total control, it's not like a jhana, but you are composed enough to step back and look at them objectively. So that is what I mean by having subdued. Having subdued means temporarily putting it under your control, so that you can step back and look at it without being dragged by it, and becoming part of the story. It's like, if you know a friend of yours who is a fellow yogi, and then one day you see him or her very, very angry, in a rage, and then say, hey, be mindful, be mindful. Do you think he or she can be mindful? He may not be, because he's in a rage. Yeah, and you might get hurt if you try to persist. Right? Yes.
One day I just also noticed that for people who are depressed, you tell them to just practice Satipatthana. They can't.
Yeah.
They can't. They need to deal with it in some
Other ways
first, so that the mind is calmer, is clearer. Then only they can practice.
Right. Okay. So this, as I said, these are the 4 prerequisites for practicing Satipatthana. You must have enough. You must put in the energy. You must be clearly knowing, looking back at what's happening to your mind, and you must remember to do so, and remembering the technique. And thirdly, you must have gained some degree of control over your worldly longings and dejections. Okay, so much for this page.